This video has been brought to you by CuriosityStream and Nebula, featuring exclusive content from me. More at the end. Bonjour et bienvenue à Feature History, where on top of our figurative butchering of French, we'll be featuring literal butchering of French. Who wrote this shit? I did. We'll be using today to take a look at the often overshadowed Haitian Revolution. Given the generic title, it's easy to assume that it was just one of them wars in one of them countries. But what if I told you that the Haitian Revolution tore down slavery, and empires, and colonialism before any of that was in vogue? Haiti would become the first independent nation of Latin America, the second Republic of America, the first to permanently abolish slavery in the world, and the only state in history founded by slaves. That's what really makes this revolution stand out, is the fact that it all started as a slave insurrection. It was led by slaves and fought by slaves. In response to humanity's greatest atrocity, Haitians took the reins of history and changed the world. And well, I'm gonna try to tell you about it. So clear the distractions, close your eyes, this took forever to animate, and picture the island of Haiti, Santo Domingo, Hispaniola, the Spanish island, the Pearl of the Caribbean. It's gone by a lot of names. It's the second largest island of the West Indies, and it would be the first colonized by Christopher Columbus. Originally populated by the Taino people, after the island was settled in 1493 by the Spanish, the indigenous people were systematically killed through disease, slavery, and massacre. Haiti was seized for its gold deposits, and once exhausted, many left the island and it became home to French, English, and Dutch pirates. It wasn't until the late 17th century that France officially laid claim to the western third of the island, establishing their colony of Saint-Domingue. It wasn't long before its value was found in coffee, indigo, and infamously sugar. The French landowners, the Grands Blancs, established large plantations and imported slaves from West Africa. The colony would go on to produce 60% of the world's coffee, 40% of France and Britain's sugar, and would be the most prosperous colony in the West Indies, and the French Empire as a whole. The colony grew to a population of 550,000 people, 500,000 being slaves. In all of Saint-Domingue's history, the majority of its population was African-born. It was rare a slave would live past 3 years on the island. Those who were able to survive the Middle Passage were subjected to cruel and unending work on the sugar plantations. The Grands Blancs practiced in methods of slow torture, the importation of man-eating dogs, and apathy to the yellow fever that ravaged much of their workforce. Outside of the Grands Blancs and their slaves, the island was home to European artisans, merchants, and workers who often held animosity to the minority of freed slaves and mixed-race mulattoes, the affranchis. The colony was starved of European women, and so the practice of taking slave wives wasn't uncommon, and the resulting children were emancipated. Add in the few freed slaves and you have the affranchis. Some affranchis owned their own plantations and their own slaves and aspired to be equal to their white counterparts. However, the society was built on inequality in race, gender, and class. The colony wasn't self-sufficient, the majority of its crop exported and the majority of its food imported. With a population of 90% African slaves, responsible for a third of the entire Atlantic slave trade, the foundation of Saint-Domingue was the suffering of the majority for the welfare of the minority. It worked well for the Grands Blancs for over 100 years. It all changed, however, in 1789, with the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of Citizen. The newly established French First Republic would decree all men free and equal, ambiguous as to whether that included women, slaves, or even anybody outside France proper. The affranchis had long been pushing for their own equality, and after the declaration, Vincent Auger would launch a failed uprising against the colonial government for the right to vote. With his brutal execution, the affranchis would turn to petitioning the revolutionary government in Paris. In 1791, they were awarded limited freedoms in the May 15th decree. However, the colonial government never complied with this order. As a consequence, isolated skirmishes broke out between affranchis and whites, sowing the seeds of insurrection in Saint-Domingue. On the night of the 21st of August 1791, thousands of slaves would gather in a secret voodoo ceremony. Despite their disparate backgrounds, many of these slaves had been prisoners of war, and the loose West African elements of voodoo served as a common heritage for these people. The voodoo high priest, Dutty Boukman, would give the signal for rebellion that night. The island was shrouded in a deep darkness under the clouds of a tropical storm, and the slaves would take their machetes that they used to cut the sugarcane to cut down their masters and light up the night with burning plantations. The initial uprising was an unprecedented success. Their organization begged disbelief. The affranchis would be blamed. The affranchis would blame the Grand Blancs. Nobody believed the slaves could do this themselves. In just 10 days, the slaves held control of the entire northern province. The fighting was brutal. There was no semblance of honor, as on both sides civilians were targeted, captured,